Anything sums up the infighting in the GOP right now, it might be this hotly contested race for Saxby Chambliss's U.S. Senate seat. Chambliss, of course, is retiring. He's a well-respected Washington veteran who has played an influential, important, and at times somewhat quiet role in helping shape foreign policy under Presidents Bush and Obama. But a lot of Republican voters in the state of Georgia see Chambliss is willing to reach across the aisle as a bad thing, and that he's maybe too much of Washington. Chambliss, of course, has been unapologetic, I should say, about his bipartisan approach to lawmaking, and it's hard to forget when he stood up to anti-tax crusader Grover Norquist, saying that he cared more about his country than ATR's tax reform pledge. So who will replace him, and what will this mean for the National Party in this very important race? Joining me right now to talk about this is David Patton, a guy who knows a ton about these hotly contested GOP primary races. We see a picture of Phil Gingrey right there, but we want to talk first about Paul Brown, a sitting congressman, a Tea Party favorite, a Navy reservist, a veteran, a guy who really fits the bill for an anti-establishment Republican. Tell us what you think about Dr. Brown.
Well, one reason he's going to be such an interesting candidate in this race is that he sort of typifies this turn to the right, very social conservative slant, if you will, that we're seeing in a lot of GOP primary politics right now. One of the big concerns is if this race with three sitting congressmen, basically a former Secretary of State, everybody vying who can be the most conservative so that they can get through that primary, so they can win the primary, that they may have to go so far to the right, and there's the risk of making inflammatory statements, some of which have already been made by some of these candidates, that whoever comes out into the general will be damaged goods. That's what the party has to watch out for, because they have to win this race. This is a critical race.
It is a critical race. One thing Brown also has is a Obamacare alternative that he is touting, and so that might be very popular with the voters of Georgia as well. Let's also take a look real quickly at Phil Gingrey, also a medical doctor as well from the state of Georgia here. He's been really highlighting, and this has been going on for a while, this whole independent panel advisory board, IPAB, this whole death panel situation. This is something that Gingrey has talked about. Now, you don't see a lot of sniping between Gingrey and Brown. They reserve that kind of for Jack Kingston, who we'll talk about in just a moment. But what's your take on Gingrey here? Is he a serious candidate in this race?
No, I think he's a very serious candidate. I think he has a good base of support in Georgia. I think he will have kind of thrown in his face some of the remarks that he's made before in reference to maybe having some support for the famous Todd Akin.
Yeah, that's going to come back to haunt him, especially when he's got a female opponent in this primary. Let's talk about Karen Handel, and this is someone you really wanted to make sure that we highlighted because you've been looking at these female GOP candidates. Talk about her in a couple seconds, if you could.
Well, of course, she's a former Secretary of State. She sort of rose to fame more nationally with her role in the whole Susan G. Komen controversy.
Right. She resigned because they were refunding their funding, restoring their funding of Planned Parenthood.
And she could give a very different dynamic to this race because the expected Democratic standard bearer is Michelle Nunn, the former daughter of
Yeah, we'll talk
Sam
about her in a second. Yeah, this would be
So you could have a female-on-female contest, which would make it a lot harder to make this the war on women this year.
And I'll be interested to see if Amy Kramer comes out and supports her as well, Tea Party.
Tea Party Express chairwoman.
Yeah, who's based in Atlanta. I'm sure she's paying attention. Let's talk about Jack Kingston, a senior member of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense of the committee itself. And it's important because, as we discussed earlier in the show, Georgia has a very important reliance on military bases in some of the cities like Columbus, Augusta, and Savannah. But his reputation as an appropriator, which has become kind of a dirty word in the GOP, is going to definitely come back to haunt him in this race, and it's already being used by Brown and Gingrey, two of his opponents.
Yeah, so maybe a more establishment, you know, we can see that divide you're talking about. If you were looking at probably more establishment, you'd probably look at Kingston, you'd probably look at Handel, former Secretary of State of Atlanta, or of Georgia, and then you'd probably look at Brown and Gingrey on the other side.
And we'll talk, and next up is David Perdue. We'll talk about him real quickly. He is holding himself up as a business leader. He has lots of experience with Fortune 500 companies, including Reebok and Dollar General. He's worked in Asia and Europe, so that's an important criteria right there. But he is putting himself out there as an outsider, although he is of the former governor Sonny Perdue's family, a cousin, I believe, but trying to make some separation right here. Let's take a look real quickly at how the candidates stack up right now. According to an Insider Advantage poll, Fox 5 poll, the local Fox affiliate in Atlanta as well, an Insider Advantage, our friend Matt Towery does those polls, really a good guy there. You can see it's a tight race. Brown and Gingrey are out in front right now. Closely behind them is Jack Kingston, Karen Handel at 9%, and David Perdue at just 5%. But look at the undecided number there, David, 37%. That just goes to show you where we are in this race and how difficult it's going to be for these candidates to stand out, especially when there are three sitting members of the House of Representatives right now.
With that many candidates, and you got to figure there's a margin of error on that poll, maybe 3-4% plus minus. So basically, they're all in the same pot right now. They're going to get a chance to make their case to the voters in a primary. It's going to be an extremely competitive primary. Probably having a base of conservative Tea Party support would be a big advantage in the race, unless a candidate comes out and shoots themselves in the foot, makes a silly remark that becomes highly criticized, and then all of a sudden that advantage leaks away. So it's going to be fascinating to watch.
It is going to be fascinating. It's going to be a hot summer in Georgia
for
these folks. Let's also take 1 second at Michelle Nunn, who you mentioned here briefly. And she is the daughter of the former Democratic senator, longtime senator from Georgia, Sam Nunn, a guy who is kind of still a legend, even though he's a Democrat in Georgia, and the Democratic Party doesn't have quite the cachet as it used to, but you know, his name is going to be a part of this, and as we mentioned with military, it's going to be a huge issue in this race. You think Georgia could go blue this time around?
No, I think it definitely could go blue. You know, in the last race that Chambliss had, he basically won just by a tiny, tiny amount. He was lucky to win.
Well, it'll be interesting for sure. We got to run. David, thanks so much for being here. We'll take a close look at Kentucky, too, in the coming days. Also a very interesting race happening right there. We want to hear from you. What do you guys think about this GOP Senate race in Georgia or other GOP primaries? Will this be good or bad for the party in the long run? Reach out to us on our social media platforms. Contact me directly, JohnB_Newsmax. You can find us on Facebook as well, facebook.com/NewsmaxTV.
Federal and state authorities urge every American family to have an emergency radio. It can save you and your loved ones from disaster. Now, Newsmax has an incredible offer for you. Get our Weather Band emergency radio free. This emergency radio picks up AM, FM, and the NOAA Weather Band. It even works without batteries, essential in an emergency. Call the number below right now and you'll get this emergency radio, plus 2 great publications, including the award-winning Newsmax magazine. Each month, Newsmax brings you the important stories you won't see anywhere else. Plus, you'll get incisive commentary from David Limbaugh, George Will, Michael Reagan, Ben Stein, Dr. Laura, and more. Ben Stein says Newsmax reveals the unafraid, uncomplicated bare-knuckles truth about today's dangerous world. Mike Reagan says, I guarantee that you'll love Newsmax magazine. This emergency radio offer with Newsmax magazine won't last long. Order online or call the number on your screen right now.
Newsmax magazine is proud to present a unique tribute to our 40th president, Ronald Reagan. It is a very special documentary in our commemorative issue of Newsmax magazine, celebrating the centennial of President Reagan's birth. First, here's a video clip from the award-winning documentary, Rendezvous with Destiny.
We're in the midst of a springtime of hope for America.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Impulses of an evil empire.
Tear down this wall.
I believe that together we can keep this rendezvous with destiny.
In the next several minutes, you will learn things about President Ronald Reagan that you've never seen, heard, or read before. Welcome to today's special Newsmax event celebrating the life and legacy of President Reagan. During this historic presentation, we will commemorate President Reagan's storied life. We'll revisit his 2 terms in office and recollect his proudest achievements and greatest challenges. Ronald Reagan's life reads like a fairy tale of success stories. He was an accomplished athlete, an honored veteran, a famous actor, the governor of California, and of course, our nation's 40th president.
He called himself a citizen politician and only entered politics when he warned government was gaining too much power. By then he was age 54 with a successful career behind him. Twice elected President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan was a contradiction to some. Once a Democrat, then a Republican. A champion of smaller government whose own government grew. A fiscal conservative who failed to balance the budget. His critics mistook his affability for weakness, But behind the smile and the charm existed an extraordinary leader with unique skills and bold and revolutionary ideas.
We only had time to share just a few of the top defining moments in Ronald Reagan's presidency, but you'll get to see them all in Rendezvous with Destiny. By the way, the president's close relationship with the Pope is especially fascinating. You'll also learn how dealing with an alcoholic father helped shape Reagan's ability to negotiate. And if you ever wondered what the leader of the free world likes to get for the holidays, well, you'll find that out as well. So let's review today in this free offer. We are sending you a copy of Ronald Reagan, Rendezvous with Destiny, and the collector's limited edition of our issue commemorating the 100th anniversary of President Reagan's birth.
Right now, when you subscribe to Newsmax magazine, you can own both the DVD and receive the special Reagan 100th birthday commemorative edition. That's $25 in bonus gifts when you subscribe. Go to newsmax.com/Reagan13 to subscribe today. Newsmax.com/Reagan13. Join the millions who read Newsmax magazine every month.
Hello and welcome back to America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. These are busy days for Congress. They're up there for 3 weeks working on a session there. Senators and representatives are back at the nation's capital for a 3-week stretch that will take them through the St. Patrick's Day recess. I wish I had a St. Patrick's Day recess. Congress has passed a budget, but there is other work to be done, including reviewing bills designed to keep the IRS from interfering with the work of nonprofit agencies, these certain social welfare groups, 401(c)(3)s, I believe. The Stop Targeting of Political Beliefs by the IRS Act would prevent the Obama administration from establishing new rules that define what are, quote, political activities for social welfare groups organized under that 501(c)(4) section. I should clarify, 501(c)(4) section of the IRS tax code. David Patton joining us again. I was just getting refreshed with my IRS tax code for these social welfare groups.
Yeah, I was hoping you weren't going to ask me to explain the difference between a 501(c)(3) and a 501(c)(4). Of course, the C4s are the social welfare organizations.
Right, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I can tell you a definition. We won't waste everybody's time right now. We're going to get Senator Ron Johnson with us here in a second. He's working on these bills. These U.S. senators, they do have a day job. They have to go vote, and that's where he is right now. So we'll give him a few minutes to work on that, and we'll have David talk about this as well. David, we're looking at these bills. I mean, there's a lot of pageantry here. It's Stop Government Interference Week or something like that. You know, we know that these bills won't see the president's desk ever as long as Harry Reid is still controlling the floor of the Senate here. But what's your take on the GOP rolling this out now? They're going to vote on 12 different bills, and really it just gives them an opportunity to highlight some of these scandals that we've seen, including the IRS, within the Obama administration.
So we've seen a couple of examples where the left, President Obama, is trying to rally their base, talk about cutting Pentagon spending, talk about adding $56 billion that'll never see the light to federal spending. You know, to some extent, this is a Republican effort on the other side of the aisle. But it also reflects what a visceral issue this is for the Republican base. It is a very strong issue. Just about everybody in movement conservative land either was targeted themselves, knows somebody who was targeted, knows a group or the leader of a group who had to wait 2-3 years to finally get their application for nonprofit status approved by the IRS, because as we now know, they were picking out groups that had names like Tea Party, names like Patriot, and those were going off into Never Never Land. So, and it's still happening. A lot of those groups still haven't gotten their appropriate designation from the IRS.
Yeah, it's, you know, the issue here with the IRS is one that seems like one of the scandals that kind of has the most, you know, has legs to it. There's a lot here, and we're learning more and more day in and day out. On the other hand here, these are kind of overtly political groups here, and it's kind of the situation, not that there's anything wrong with what they do, but it highlights the kind of ridiculous nature of our campaign financing structure that we have right now, because everybody knows what happens here, and it may be illegal according to the letter of the law, but it certainly in some ways violates the spirit of the law.
But here's the problem, though. What about the unions that are regulated under a different 501c code?
Exactly.
There's no restrictions on them that have been proposed by the. What about the groups, the Democratic groups that for years had operated under 501c3 status who engage in political activities? There's no talk about going back and re-regulating Democratic and liberal groups that have already been.
And there should be. There should absolutely should be.
So why is it only the conservative groups that we all know since the Rick Santelli rant, February I believe 2009, that launched the Tea Party. It's only the groups since then that are going to come under the microscope.
I think one of your answers might be in your question. That's the federal unions, the dominance and the growth of these federal unions that we've seen inside the government as well. So the IRS issue is going to be a big one. Do you think this competes in any way with the objective here to keep the focus on Obamacare?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting question. It seems like some of the tax arguments and some of the Obamacare arguments are kind of conflating now. They're merging. There's a lot of talk about, well, are we going to have the individual mandate tax? Are we not going to have it? Was it a tax or wasn't? Supreme Court ruled that was a tax. So I think Republicans can deal with this IRS issue without getting the eyes too far off the ball of the critical issue, which of course is going to be Obamacare.
And when you look at the differences between a 501c3 and a 501c4 and what they can and cannot do and what they can and cannot say, it really makes you kind of look back at the McCain-Feingold Campaign Finance Reform Act, the Citizens United case, the Supreme Court, and say, you know, maybe it's time that we just have, you know, free and open, unlimited donations to these campaigns, as so long as that they are transparent and public.
Well, I think most people would like to see the donations transparent. Some elements of the 501c4 code enable that to not be the case.
Right.
That's why President Obama lambasted the Supreme Court at the State of the Union message. But you know, the other side of it is that the definition of what these nonprofits can or cannot do is already pretty clear. It's about a 50%. You can't devote more than half of your time to politicking if you're a social welfare organization. So now they're going to come in and they're going to say, don't hand out flyers, don't hand out voter guides, don't have candidates come, don't mention candidates by name. Really, that goes so far beyond the current law. How is it that the IRS just gets to decide this administratively without having to go back to Congress?
You know, one of the groups that I read that this would affect is the League of Women Voters. And anyone who's worked in local media knows that this group normally is kind of apartisan, if you will. They're very careful to not appear partisan. They host a lot of candidate forums and debates and things of that nature on these small scales where, you know, the media, obviously the big networks are going to come in there and host these debates. And the public in these small communities could miss out on that.
Yeah, I believe the League of Women Voters is 501c3, so we're going to bore the audience to death here talking about this. But I believe that these new IRS regulations wouldn't apply to them, and therefore they'd be free to continue their activities.
And the issue, again, is the kind of the transparency with the 501c4. Should these groups that don't have to disclose where their money comes from really receive the same free speech benefits as the rest of us in the country? And the Supreme Court weighed in already.
And there's another side to that argument, which is we saw this in California with the Prop 8 vote. The tendency has been for liberal groups to get these names of these donors and just broadcast them everywhere. Give people, in the case of gun control, give them a map, show them where their house is. And
real security issues as well.
Yeah, there's security issues.
So it's going to be interesting. We'll try to get Senator Johnson to talk more about this with us when we come right back. Right now, we got to take a run to another commercial break. We'd like to hear from you as well. What do you think about the GOP's efforts to talk about the IRS targeting? We'd love to hear from you. Reach me on Twitter or Facebook, JohnB_Newsmax. We'll be right back with more here on America's Forum after this.